Anywhere with you, Frank. This is the end of the line for us. From now on, I'm number one. Me, Margaret Houlihan. And believe me, soldier, I deserve better than you.
Burns, you wanted to see me?
Yes, and it's very important.
What's the problem, Frank?
We have a situation that's way out of hand and something has to be done.
I've sent for Corporal Klinger, sir.
Who are you? I'm Loretta Swit. Loretta Swit, our guest star, internationally acclaimed actress. We remember actress Loretta Swit from MASH. She won multiple Emmys for her role. And this evening we look back, including the scene watched by nearly 106 million Americans. Loretta Swit has remained silent for nearly half a century about the most strained relationship of her career. But a few days before her death, she chose to break that silence. Without being secretive, Swit left behind her final lines revealing the truth that had never been confirmed, the name of the co-star who had made her tired, impatient, and miserable for many years on the set of MASH. Once a famous on-screen couple, after 11 seasons of filming and thousands of hours of filming, what remains between them is not friendship but an unhealable rift. A few days before her death, Swit left a series of cryptic messages on her personal Instagram page clearly aimed at a person who had caused her more suffering than the audience ever knew. The first line that appears is a picture of her hand touching a dog, but the text is unambiguous. There are people I have been forced to work with for years not out of respect but because I had no choice. Their lack of focus meant I had to retake many scenes and hide my fatigue after each take. The name isn't mentioned directly, but the context is clear. Thanks so much for joining us. Thank you for inviting me. Yes, I do have a lot to talk about. I warned him that once. He said, "What are you up?" Swit hasn't done many. Here is your provided text converted into paragraphs without skipping or adding a single word. Lon Gunn is the only one where she's had to stick with the same group of co-stars for more than a decade. And of those, only one has ever been indirectly described as annoying, Larry Linville, the actor who played Frank Burns. You want anything from me before I go? I'm yours. Swit and Linville played a pair of star-crossed lovers on music screen. Swit's character Margaret Houlihan was a tough, sharp-tongued officer. Linville's character Frank Burns was a goofy, hypocritical, annoying army doctor. They were the butt of jokes in the early seasons of MASH. But behind the camera, there was nothing funny. Swit is well trained and takes each scene seriously. She wants her characters to develop, to have depth and reason. Linville is the complete opposite. He approaches the role with exaggerated comedy, often breaking scenes to make his co-stars laugh, even in tense scenes. Swit often had to retake the scene because her co-stars couldn't keep up the pace. There was someone who made me lose my temper in important scenes because they treated everything like a joke, she said bluntly in a 2003 interview with Emmy magazine. She didn't name names, but industry insiders knew exactly who she was referring to. Larry Linville, in a 1995 exclusive interview with the Los Angeles Times, said, "Loretta took the role very seriously. I thought Frank was the funny character. We didn't meet there, and that created tension. The tension persisted throughout the first 5 seasons. But appearing together nearly every episode, Swit and Linville did not develop a relationship off-screen. Alan Alda and Jamie Farrar frequently dined with Swit, but Linville never showed up. Several crew members said they actively avoided working with him alone when he didn't have to. When season 5 ended, Linville left the show. The official reason: he felt his character was no longer growing. But the facts on the sidelines also suggest that the decision was partly due to the tension between the two. After Linville left, the character of Margaret Houlihan immediately developed into a deeper, more independent character, no longer bound by a frustrating relationship. From that point on, Swit shined brighter. Margaret had several episodes of her own with clear psychological details and was loved by viewers not only for her strong personality but also for her honesty. Swit won 2 Emmys, not when she was paired with Linville, but after the role of Frank Burns disappeared from the story. When Linville died in 2000 of pulmonary complications, Swit made no public statement, no memorial, no public condolences. A People magazine story reported that she had sent a note indirectly through a mutual friend. When asked later, Swit said, "Not everyone I've worked with is someone I hold dear." A polite enough answer, but a sharp one. Back to her final Instagram post, there's a bold line: when people talk about on-screen couples, they don't know the real fatigue that goes on behind the scenes. There's no doubt about it, Swit has nailed what fans have always suspected. She once had a co-star who, if she had her choice, she would never work with again. When Loretta Swit was cast as Margaret Houlihan in MASH*, the script gave her little choice. The character was written as a hot-tempered, uptight female medical officer who existed largely as a foil to the male character's jokes. Every scene she appeared in was constrained by stereotypes. Women in the military were the subject of comedy, not the center of drama. Swit read the script, accepted the role, but she had envisioned a different path in mind. As early as season 2, began to communicate directly with the writers, not to demand special privileges, but to make clear suggestions. Margaret could no longer be a stereotype. As a lieutenant colonel in charge of medical care in the midst of war, the character had a reason to be strong, to be torn, to not only exist through screams or jealousies. She suggested small changes in dialogue, reactions, and psychology, enough for the writers to realize Swit was building a person, not a role. At first, the response was not positive. Some producers worried that the new model would make the character less funny and less marketable. But Swit didn't stop there. She brought in real-life accounts of women serving in the military, asked for analysis of situations, and sometimes rewrote a dialogue so that Margaret wouldn't be humiliated for the sake of humor. The exchanges repeated themselves season after season, getting more intense and more aggressive. The persistence started to pay off. In season 4, Margaret's episodes were no longer filled with angst or empty sentimentality. She was given the chance to express her fear when a nurse died on the operating table, her anguish when falling in love in the middle of a war, and her determination when facing unreasonable superiors. Swit didn't demand the spotlight. She demanded. Already happened. It was then, according to those present, that Eusence lifted her hand to her face, wiping a tear from her eye, a fleeting moment barely noticeable in the grandeur of the ceremony, but a rare unguarded glimpse into something deeper. According to those present, under her breath she whispered, "I don't accept this." Then, after a pause, almost as if correcting herself, she added, "But I suppose I have no choice." Finally, with a quiet sigh, she murmured she was always going to find her own way. No official statement was given about what moved her, and she certainly didn't intend to draw attention to herself, but those who saw it understood it wasn't just the weight of the day, nor was it just pride. What do you think about Mirabelle's appearance at the inauguration? Possibilities the world can only imagine. She is a reflection of a changing era, a reminder that true power is not born from titles or crowns but from courage, from character, from the simple steady decision to walk forward into the unknown. What moment touched you the most in Princess Charlotte's journey? Tell you. Stereotypes. Women in the military were the subject of comedy, not the center of drama. Swit read the script, accepted the role, but she had envisioned a different path in mind. As early as season 2, began to communicate directly with the writers, not to demand special privileges but to make clear suggestions. Margaret could no longer be a stereotype. As a lieutenant colonel in charge of medical care in the midst of war, the character had a reason to be strong, to be torn, to not only exist through screams or jealousies. She suggested small changes in dialogue, reactions, and psychology, enough for the writers to realize Swit was building a person, not a role. At first the response was not positive. Some producers worried that the new model would make the character less funny and less marketable, but Swit didn't stop there. She brought in real-life accounts of women serving in the military, asked for analysis of situations, and sometimes rewrote a dialogue so that Margaret wouldn't be humiliated. For the sake of humor, the exchanges repeated themselves season after season, getting more intense and more aggressive. The persistence started to pay off. In season 4, Margaret's episodes were no longer filled with angst or empty sentimentality. She was given the chance to express her fear when a nurse died on the operating table, her anguish when falling in love in the middle of a war, and her determination when facing unreasonable superiors. Swit didn't demand the spotlight. She demanded. Asked her if she regretted it, Swit said emphatically, "I didn't become an actress to bounce between half-baked roles." In an industry where women are often written off as mere figures, Swit forces a rethink. She doesn't wait for an opportunity, she creates it, not through gimmicks or scandals but by turning a background character into a force to be reckoned with. Margaret Houlihan is a collective product, but the soul Swit journey from small stage to national star. Before she was a TV star, Loretta Swit spent hours backstage at a small theater waiting for her turn to say her lines. There were no cameras, no bright lights, no crew, just a young actress standing in the middle of an empty auditorium waiting for her chance. Was born in Payuk, New Jersey, into a working-class family of Polish descent. Strict discipline and respect for the value of work were emphasized from an early age. She grew up in the post-war years when artistic dreams were discouraged, especially for women, but Swit took no shortcuts. She studied acting at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts and accepted that she had to start from scratch. Literally, for the first several years her career consisted of small roles on off-Broadway local television and a few uncredited guest spots on sketch comedy shows. The few people who worked with her then still remember her thin figure, quick walk, and crumpled script in hand. No complaining, no demands, just work. Her break came in the early 1970s when she appeared in films like Stand Up and Be Counted 1972 and then Freebie in the Bean 1974, but it was Mass that really broke her when she was asked to audition for the role of Margaret Houlihan. Swit accepted even though she knew she would be inheriting a character that had been played famously by Sally Kellerman in the film version. Swit doesn't copy her predecessor. She reimagines Margaret in her own way. Unlike the big screen where Margaret is a caricature, Swit chooses to develop the character as a real person, a woman trying to maintain her dignity in a context where her presence is always seen as out of place. From the first season on, Swit did something different. She didn't make a scene. She chose to play the character inversely. Instead of reacting loudly, she let her character hold back her emotions. Instead of screaming for laughs, she held back. That choice made the audience pay attention. She didn't take up much screen time, but when she did, no one missed her. Margaret became an emotional anchor among a series of talkative and satirical male characters. But it's not easy to maintain that. While her co-stars can improvise, Swit has to balance real emotion with the script. She often arrives on set before everyone else, takes notes on each scene, and edits her lines so that her character doesn't stray from the flow. It's an invisible labor, but it's essential to the longevity of a series that's been running for 11 years. Alan Alda once described Swit as the most serious person in the room but never annoying. Farr called her a non-stop machine. Both acknowledged that while she didn't talk much about herself, Swit always conducted herself to the highest standards for her role and put pressure on herself to maintain that for more than a decade. Outside of Mass, Swit remained on stage, where she felt freer. Plays like Shirley Valentine and the Vagina monologues allowed her to do what she couldn't do on television, break with the structure. Try out roles that went beyond her familiar image. But she never left Mass halfway. Many offers came in, including a big movie contract, but she turned them down. For Swit, a role that wasn't completed was a role that wasn't finished. She didn't want to leave it halfway. Swit once said, "I'm in this business to play a character until I can't anymore." The spotlight doesn't come automatically. It has to be drawn to it through steady, precise, and persistent work. Something she has never let up on throughout her career. The heart does not need light. Swit has devoted all of her post-Mass time to animal protection, not the kind of remote participation or event-attending photo ops. She has traveled to shelters, participated in vaccination and neutering campaigns, rescued abandoned cats and dogs, and even adopted them herself when no one else would. Turning down many opportunities to return to television, Swit has stuck to her goal to build Sweetheart Animal Alliance into an organization that is real, that is not just in name. For her, this isn't a post-fame gig. It's her nature. Swit has said that she didn't have many friends growing up, but she always had cats and dogs around the house. Their presence made her feel secure. During the days of filming Mass, she often brought a rescue dog to set. It was her way of staying balanced in an industry that demands her strength. Swit doesn't need to say much to understand how committed she is to this work. When Sweetheart announces a fundraising campaign, she personally goes out and calls for donations. When a California animal shelter burns down, Swit contacts the local community to temporarily evacuate the animals. She doesn't wait for someone else to do it. She doesn't outsource the job. Swit didn't need to be in front of the camera to be noticed. She stepped back and let small acts of kindness show that dedication can exist anywhere. No more roles, no more awards, but hundreds of little lives lived on thanks to one woman who never stopped. Goodbye with the truth. In the last 3 years of her life, Loretta Swit had largely disappeared from public life. No more television interviews, no fanfares, no stage invitations, only a few sporadic social media posts. Brief, soft-spoken, but not meaningless. To those who knew her, this was not unusual. They knew she had undergone heart surgery and had refused all media interference to keep the final years of her life quiet. But her failing health, Swit maintained her usual routine, drawing, embroidering, caring for her pets, and sharing photos of her daily life on Instagram. But her final series of posts in late May 2025 were unlike anything she had ever written. The words were sharper, quieter, like someone saying her last words but wanting to keep her tone the same until the very end. On May 27th, she posted a photo of a dog sitting by a window, the light slanting through its gray fur. The caption read, "I don't regret anything. I just think I may have been quiet about some things for too long." No more metaphors. No more evasions. Swit was leaving a message for those who have followed her, and for her own past. The next day, another status appeared. "Someone used to make me not want to step foot on set every morning. I don't hate them. I just can't forget the times they made my job harder than it needed to be." On May 30th, Loretta Swit died in her sleep at her home in New York. She was 87. The news was confirmed by her publicist and reported by major media the same day. There was no grand memorial event, no press conference in honor. Everything happened exactly as she had lived, quiet, assured, and proactive. Several publishing sources have revealed that she left behind an unfinished manuscript of a memoir called Hot Lips and Heartstrings. The document is said to contain candid passages about the behind-the-scenes of Mashu, including specific references to the years I spent performing with people who made me lose faith in my profession. There has been no confirmation from her agent, but the news has spread quickly, being shared widely as a finale to the journey. Alan Alda, Swit's closest co-star, wrote on social media after hearing of her death, "She always knew what to say and when to say it. She never said anything too much, but she never shied away from saying it. No flowery words, no sympathy, just respect from someone who knew Swit better than most, who shared the stage with her." Loretta Swit has left, taking with her a career built on discipline, courage, and loyalty to what is right. She chose not to be loud. But in the end, she left a voice that cannot be ignored. Her story is not meant to be told just once, but to be a lasting reminder of a woman who dared to live her truth, work her truth, and speak her mind at the right time. If what you've just seen has given you something to think about, please share this video with anyone who loves mass or appreciates candor in the profession. Subscribe to never miss another insightful behind the scenes.